Ecomadres y ecopadres, que se escuche esta canción. Ecomadres y ecopadres, vamos a tomar acción.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly EcoCharla, or EarthChat. I'm Erandi Trevino, Texas Field Coordinator for Moms Clean Air Force and its EcoMadres program. We are a national community of more than 1.5 million parents and caregivers united to protect children from air pollution and climate change. We fight for clean air and environmental justice. I am honored to welcome our special guest today, Antonieta Cadiz, as we discuss the current state of petrochemicals and our hope for the future. Antonieta is a renowned national Latino journalist and currently serves as the Deputy Executive Director for Climate Power En Acción, where she works to increase people's awareness about climate change and its impact on Latino communities and push for just policy solutions. Welcome, Antonieta.
Hey, Randy, thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor for me to be here.
Could you please share with us a little bit about your work in bringing air pollution issues that affect Latino communities to light?
Well, first of all, I have to say I consider myself an honorary ecomadre. As you know, I am the mom of 2 kids, 2 boys, and I live here in Houston, Texas, as you. And so that's first for me. And second, so as you mentioned before, I started my career here in the United States as a journalist, as a political reporter. And in that position, I covered a lot of issues that are important for our community: migration, education, jobs, and of course, climate. But then, as you well know, something really important happened here in our community, which was Hurricane Harvey. And unfortunately, my house was one of 1,000 houses that were impacted by this historic extreme weather event driven by climate change. And when that happened, like, my whole world changed. And the way I saw climate change completely changed. And so I realized by that moment that we are communities of color. We are the most impacted by climate change. We are the most impacted by air pollution. We have suffered from several decades of environmental injustice. And actually being one number between, in millions of people that are impacted by the climate crisis, it was an eye-opening moment for me and for my family. And from that moment, I started looking, and I found this wonderful opportunity in the organization I am right now, which is Climate Power, which is basically a strategic communications organization focused on winning and changing the politics of climate and driving the climate narrative. And inside Climate Power, I lead the En Acción team, which basically is focused on how do we connect the dots between, for example, now the importance of the clean energy expansion with the climate law, with actually Latino audiences, how we make sure our community knows how important this is for us, for our future, the future of our children. So in a nutshell, basically, that is the way, and that is my road, my personal road, and that led me to this moment.
Yeah, no, I completely understand and appreciate, right, the power of that journey. My mom's home also was one of many that flooded, and my niece for years. I mean, now it seems that she's starting to get better with storms, but for years she was so scared because she thought that her home was going to flood again. So it was really, really impactful.
Well, as you know, even though we haven't had a new Hurricane Harvey here in Houston, as you well know, there are areas that always flood, like every year here in the city. And who live in those areas? We live in those areas. So, and it's an issue, like, if we don't share, like, what we're living through, it makes it more difficult to actually achieve progress. So that's why the work, for example, of EcoMadres is so important, because there are a lot of Latina moms out there that are struggling with the same issues, and it's really helpful to hear from EcoMadres.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, my mom and I also live in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. We share a home here in Houston, and the air quality here impacts our health. We feel it very strongly because we have fibromyalgia, among other chronic health problems, and also I'm pretty sure what's upper respiratory inflammatory issues, because we have so many, such a high sensitivity to the pollution. Here around my neighborhood in particular, the petrochemical industry is a big problem, right? Houston has the largest petrochemical industry in the nation, and it's also home to a really large Latino population. Petrochemicals are chemical products derived from fossil fuels. Plastics are their largest category. They're everywhere, and the industry that makes them is booming. Petrochemicals also include combustibles such as gas and diesel. Families across the U.S. are being regularly exposed to dangerous petrochemicals in the air they breathe and the water that they drink. Antonieta, can you please explain why they are such a threat to our health, especially in vulnerable communities?
Absolutely. The problem with them are several. The first one is that they are super energy intensive. So what does this mean? It means that they dump an enormous amount of carbon pollution into the air. And as you were saying, Erandi, the problem is that these petrochemical plants are inserted in the heart of our communities. So this pollution they release into the air is exactly what gets into our lungs, and this compromises our health. And just to put you an example, I grabbed some numbers here. There is, for example, one plant, it's called the Louisiana Formosa Mega Complex, which emits 13.6 million tons of carbon pollution in the New Orleans area. And just to give you an example, that is the equivalent of 2.8 million cars in the road. So, it's a lot. And the problem is that we breathe that air. Here in the area we both live, Cancer Alley. Cancer Alley is basically an area that's full of refineries, petrochemicals. It compromised several states like Louisiana, Mississippi, etc. And this area, the name is not a coincidence. It's where you find people in the community with a prevalence in terms of chronic illnesses like cancer, respiratory conditions, etc. This is not a coincidence. This is a direct result of the presence of the fossil fuel industry in our communities.
Yeah, even here in Houston, we have several cancer clusters, some that have been identified already, but some that honestly in the communities know that they exist because they know, down a certain street or a certain, neighborhood has so much of a prevalence of cancer. That's not even to mention other respiratory issues, fatigue, inflammation, all these other things that come as a result, right, of breathing these petrochemicals. So one of the issues is that plastics are everywhere, and the industry that makes them is just growing, right? It's booming. And families across the US are being regularly exposed to these dangerous petrochemicals, as you mentioned, in the air that they breathe and even in the water that they're drinking. Can you please share why it's important to amplify impacted community member stories? I know you spoke about it a little bit, but why is it so important to protect people from the petrochemical pollution and to let others know why that's needed?
I think, first of all, I am going to talk like a mom. First of all, we see our families' health decreasing over time. We see our kids having respiratory conditions. We are more exposed to chronic illnesses as a direct result of this problem. So this, it's like super related to our daily lives, and it has a direct impact in our present and in our future. So if we don't know, if we don't have the information, like what will happen is that you will see your family health being compromised and you don't know why. You don't know why your kid is having so many asthma attacks. You don't know why you have, you develop certain illness that you don't have any, you don't have any precondition, or you don't have any family history, but suddenly this appears. So it's really important that you know what is the relation between the environment that surrounds you and the direct impact that has to your health. That's the first one. And I think the second one, and as important, is that we need to share these stories, because if we don't share them, we will find similar patterns here. We will find similar stories. And then we realize that it's not only me, it's not only my neighborhood, it's a lot of us. We are having the same problem. And if a lot of us have the same problem, then we can raise our voices, our hands, and say, hey, this is impacting our community, and we can go to our representatives, we can talk in Congress, and we can say, we need to change this. And that is how you change the politics of climate, is by sharing your stories, is by uniting your voices. That's why this is so important.
Absolutely. Thank you. To protect frontline and fenceline communities from the burden of toxic emissions from plastic waste, we must halt future build out of petrochemical facilities and transition to safer materials and processes. Antonieta, any last words about what you would like to see in the future when it comes to petrochemicals, and what gives you hope?
I would say that what gives me hope is what we have already accomplished. If we think about last year, for example, we had an historic climate bill in Congress, the Inflation Reduction Act. And like a lot of us that we work to push that in Congress, we work to elevate the importance of a legislation like that. There was a moment where we thought that wasn't going to be possible. And then the window of opportunity opened, and we accomplished an historic legislation that will mean a lot of things for our community. It will mean more jobs. It will mean decreasing energy costs. But most of all, it will mean decreasing the climate pollution, decreasing emissions. And that is exactly what we need. That's what our community needs. So that gives me a lot of hope. Because if we could accomplish that, we can continue making progress. We can continue making the difference, and we can accomplish even more. And that's what gives me hope. And what worries me at night is that I don't want this to be the end of the road. There is so much work ahead of us. And what worries me is actually the possibility of taking a step back. What worries me is that I know there are still people trying to roll back our progress, trying to minimize the impact of climate pollution in our communities. And that really worries me, because we know that the progress we have made is essential for us. And we also know we don't have a lot of time to actually turn the clock back when it comes to climate. So that's what makes me hopeful, but also what worries me.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Everyone has the right to breathe clean air, and we have the power to use our voices to demand change for our families and for our communities. I invite all of our viewers to join us in taking action against the petrochemical industry. You can go to www.momscleanairforce.org to sign our petition calling on President Biden and the EPA to crack down on the plastics industry, to prevent petrochemical disasters, and to protect the health of people nearby. Antonieta, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Erandi. It was a pleasure.
EcoMadres y EcoPadres, vamos a